Hey guys, welcome to a quick chat about what we learned in week 2, which was effects, some stuff about motion blur, which is pretty self-explanatory, and also text animating. Let's kind of get into, we'll start with text animating. We'll go through some of the things we learned in there. I started a new composition. It automatically gave me 25 seconds, which should be fine since we're just going to play around with some text. I'm going to right click down here and go to new text. If you don't, you can do that there and add your text that way. If you don't like that way, you can go up to your text tool here and just click and type it on. That works too. When you create text, if you see this little point right here, this is where the anchor point generates. For some reason, there's no way to auto center that in After Effects. Like if you align the text to the middle, your anchor point still stays at the bottom here. So just by default, it's just out of habit, I always just make my anchor point in the middle. It may not even pertain to what you're doing, but if you want your text to rotate, like before, if I undo this and I set it back to the starting point, it's going to rotate off the bottom, which just looks weird. So just out of habit, I go up here to my pan behind tool, left click, drag, and I hold shift because that'll lock it to that vertical. Again, when I'm using this keyboard, I have my pinky always on shift and I have my thumb on spacebar because those are the two things you'll use most often. Anytime you're clicking and dragging, I'm almost always holding shift. Spacebar I use a lot when you have your composition window here. Let's say something's going on in this corner and I want to see what's up above here. If you hit spacebar, your cursor turns into a hand. If you hit spacebar and hold it. And you can left click and drag around now. So if I want to like zoom in here, I can zoom in really close and click this around and really get in and see exactly the fine details. So spacebar on your thumb and shift for your pinky really will help you speed through a lot of these things once you get comfortable with everything. So I have my text. Let me type this out more. I'm going to do multiple lines so you can see this animation tool. This is my awesome text layer. Okay, looks good. I'm gonna let's make this a little smaller. Smaller even then. I'm gonna bring this down so you can see more of the viewport. It's better. We'll center this up. Go to my line, center it in the middle, center it horizontal. Kind of. That's fine. I'm just gonna kind of format this so it looks a little bit better. Using just my tools over here to space everything out. This kind of sets the vertical on here. Okay, so let's say this is how I want my text layer to look. This is great. Now that I've messed it up, I'm going to center it again. Vertical, horizontal, and now my anchor point's way up here. So I'm going to grab that, center it again. It's just habit. I think it just annoys me when it's not there. So, okay, so now I know it's right in the middle, right? I'm going to create a quick background layer. Solid. I'll name it background. It's going to be white, which is fine. Okay, so I've got my text, my background. First thing I want to do, turn on motion blur, right? Here's your turn on motion blur for the comp. And I want to, since I know this is going to be animating and moving, I want to turn it on there, right? If it's off, it just looks weird and bad, and I will probably take off points later on if you do not have motion blur on things that are moving, just because I want you to get used to setting it on for pretty much everything. So let's talk about ways to animate this text, right? If I go to my drop down here, I have text and transform on these text layers. I'm going to lock this background. Hitting this lock just makes sure when I click here, I can't select it. This is unlocked. I can click and actually only move it around and stuff like that. So I'm going to lock my background. For my text layer, we have text and transform. If I arrow down on transform, these are the week 1 properties that we used to animate our stuff, right? Anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. This transform, for every single layer that you have down here, whether it's a solid, text, adjustment layer, light, they will all have these transform properties. These go through every single layer that you'll create down here. But we also have this text drop down. So if we drop this down, we have a few options here. We have more options, we have path options. We'll kind of talk about these in a bit. But I just want to make sure that you guys know that these transform animators are separate from what we're going to be using. You know, you could animate this text. Like if I want this text to fly in from the left, I could easily create a position keyframe. I'm going to zoom in here. This is a very short layer. Again, I need to reset my thing. But, oops, this is locked. Just extend these out so you can see them. If I do like a 2-second animation, I can have this slide on using the transform tool just fine, right? That will, I need to remember how to RAM preview in here, right? So that's pretty slow, but okay, let's do it faster, right? So I can do that with transform. But there are some things we can't do using this transform tool to animate these on. Like if we want them to fly in word by word or line by line, we can't do that here, right? There's no way to only animate this part of it. Like we have to have the entire layer animating under these transform tools. So, you know, it makes it difficult to customize it much beyond moving this entire text layer as a whole, right? So if we want to get into moving specific, I'm just going to undo all this now that I've undone something that I actually want to keep, which is extend this out. So in order to kind of customize further some of these text animations that we can do, we have this animate right here, right? And for the most part, this exists only on these text tools. So let's undo. Let's get rid of this transform. Let's just arrow that off so we don't see it. Let's hide it. And let's go to animate, and we'll just start with position. When we're doing this, it's kind of a weird way to animate. We're not actually going to create a keyframe position and move it. It works a little bit different. Think of where this layer is right now as a start or ending point of the animation that you want to accomplish, right? This position down here modifies the start or end point, that other start or end point. So if this is our start point, this is going to modify our end point, right? So if I move this around, this will be where it starts from. So if I move this stuff over to the left, this is one of my start or ending states over here now, right? And the way we get it to fly back over is we use our range selector. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. I find the easiest to use the offset. This essentially just cycles through from 0 to 100% and everything flies on. So this offset is what we're going to use to animate when we're using more specific animations with this animate tool right here. Okay, so offset, if I animate offset, create a keyframe, and I'll create a keyframe 2, and I will bring this over to 100%, then it'll cycle through each line, right, or each character. So I'll preview this out. Let me zoom out so I can see. I'm going to change my... Keep in mind, this is our work area, right? So I can trim this down. So when I do RAM previews, it just cycles through this area. I can skip all this garble. So here's a RAM preview of what that looks like. Okay, it's pretty darn fast, but you get the point. So offset is really important. If we're animating this, let me animate this along with it, and I'll show you what it does. Since this is our beginning starting point, if let's say I animate this over back to its starting point. So I'll zero this out, right? So we're going from where we were over to the left, over here, and it's going to slowly move over here, our state. So watch the entire thing. See how it's slowly coming over? Which I guess, I mean, if you wanted to do something, an animation that utilizes that, you might be able to, but we're shifting our starting point from where this animation's starting, which I don't want to do. I want it all to sit here and fly over until it's done. So watch this again. That's what this coming over, right? That's what animating this position does, which we don't want to do. So I'm going to hit this keyframe. That'll wipe out all keyframes on it. It'll keep this negative 1217. Really quick, if I undo that, if you notice, while I'm here, while I'm scrubbed to this point in time when it's 1217, if I clear this out, it'll keep that 1217, right? It'll keep this value. If I undo it again, if I'm over here at 0 and I wipe this out, it's going to keep it at 0. Excuse me. So keep in mind when you clear out keyframes and stuff like that, where this scrub tool is pretty important. Because now I just undid, I kept it at 0, and now I don't have my animation anymore, right? Because we haven't adjusted our start or end value. So if I slide this guy back over to where it needs to be, I'll go to my beginning part so I can actually see. Bring this over. Okay, so now we can see it, right? It's coming on. Sweet. So let's see what other options we have here. You can use start and end to animate it similar, to have it come on. Like if we didn't want to do offset, technically, if we wanted to do animate the end, we could do the same thing. Where we go starting from 100%, ending and coming back to its starting position 1. You could do that too. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to use this. I just find offset to be the easiest because you can start at 0, go to 100. So let's undo that. I'll do my animation again. Offset. 1 keyframe at 0, 1 keyframe at 100%. It's coming on. Sweet. So let's talk about how we can customize that further. I'm going to arrow down on the advanced tab right here. We have units based on mode, amount, shape, smoothness, ease high and low, and randomize order. Miss a little bit more room here. So units essentially just changes how this gets displayed. Right now it's in percentage. If I change this to index, it switches it to it's based off of whatever this based on is selected. So it's indexing based off of characters right now. So characters is each letter in my little text layer here. So this is 4 letters, IS 2 more. Like it add up those characters, we equal 27, right? So now we know that if we go to a random spot in here of 11.6, it's currently animating the 11th layer, right? Or the 11th character. So the W that's flying in would be the 11th character. You can change this to words, and now each word will fly on for itself, right? That's how it's animating by words now. You can also set it to lines. So if you want each line to come in, this is my awesome text layer. That works too. But if you notice how fast this is, right? It's done here, but look at how much room we still have left. Well, it's still going based off index that we had before, right? And it's at 3.8. So if we're going by lines, 3.8 means we're on the 4th line, which we don't even have. So be cognizant of what this is set to. If we go back to percentage, it sets it correctly with this being 100%. It's still 100% is still all the way to the end of text layer. So keep in mind that if you're going to fiddle with these fiddle around with these, make sure that if you change back and forth between percentage and index, that it's still spacing this offset out correctly. So now it comes in 1 line at a time, which is cool. I like that. So let me preview this. Okay, cool. Kind of boring, kind of flat, right? There's a way to kind of smooth that out, which is this ease high, ease low. If I kick this up to 60% on ease high, ease low, that eases out. It's going to start slow, speed up, and then kind of end slow. So ease high, I always get confused of which one is which, but you can see how much better that looks that way, right? It looks so much smoother. It's moving like a real object. If you're in a car and you're speeding up a car, you start from 0 and you gradually ramp up your acceleration, right, to get to 60. You don't go from 0 to 60 right away, right? Which when we had our ease high, ease low off, that's what it's doing. It starts at speed and it's at max speed the instant it starts moving, which looks just really unnatural. So if I just undid something I didn't mean to do. So if I kick this up to 60%, now it's at a nice smooth movement. If I kick it up more, it'll be even more exaggerated. So if I do like 100% on both of these, it's like super duper exaggerated. It's like, it gets really fast, right? 60 I find is like a good halfway point. A little bit more than halfway is nice and smooth. It's not too over exaggerated. It's not too cartoony, but it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. So I won't be grading off of how smooth that is. It's more that you guys know, how to use this animation tool and how to get the right things to fly in the right way. Later on, I will be grading off of how smooth this animation is, you know. So I want most of your animations to be smooth and more natural movement like this versus that linear 0% ease type look. So if we wanted to reverse this and have text layer come in first, then my awesome, and then this is. Right now we're coming out in order, but if we wanted to flip that, this mode right here is how you do that. So we can set this to subtract. And it's going to flip everything over. So it's going to, if we wanted to, we'd have to flip how our offset comes on. So if I just switch these, I bring my 100% at the beginning and go to 0, it'll bring them on backwards. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If this was actually my ending and we want to come off, you know, top to bottom, that's one way to do it. So subtract versus add is good. I haven't really played with intersect min-max difference. I'm sure you can and figure out exactly what it does, but I haven't actually done that much. So I'm going to keep it to add. So, okay, cool. This is my really awesome intro, right? This is how I wanted it to come in. So maybe let's try a different let's maybe have it scale out. That sounds good, right? Rather than going animate or add and scale, if we do that, that's going to add a scale effect to our starting position on this animator. So animator 1 up here, I'm going to get rid of this advanced and range selector. Animator 1, this is the initial position, right? This is how we're affecting our second state. Adding scale here keeps that state, or attaches itself to this position, right? We're just stacking on top. So if we wanted it to come in like that, also being scaled down, if I set this to 0, it'll be scaled down and flying in, right? So it's kind of cool, I guess, if that's what you're wanting to do. I'll preview it so you can see it. But that's not what I'm looking for. I want it to scale out once it's already hit this point, right? So let's get rid of scale. If I go back up, I'm going to click out of this so I don't have anything selected. If I go back up to animate and I go to scale, it's going to add a new animator, which gives me a new range selector to animate after it, right? So now I'm not attaching myself to what we've done here. I can do a new animation after it. So let's go to scale. I want it to scale down to 0%. That's how I want I want it to end, right? So it automatically scaled it down. Now I need to go back and kind of animate backwards. So I'll do an offset keyframe, and since that's on the second keyframe, I want it to be gone, which it is. So let's go to my first keyframe, and I'll bring it up to 100%. Okay, so it'll stay scaled up 100% here, and then it'll start moving through our offset. So it'll start the animation from 100% to 0 of animating everything down, right? Okay, so that's all well and good, but I don't want it to go letter by letter. That looks kind of dumb. So again, let's arrow down our advanced, and let's do words. Okay, so now each word is going. But if you notice, if I zoom in here, each word, like the word layer, they're all scaling down individually on its letter, which I don't want. I want the entire word to scale down like together. So the way we get there, if we get out of advanced, let's go up to our other options, which is up here for more options. We can decide how each of these characters has its own anchor point right now, because we have anchor point grouping set to character. Well, if we want to have each word have its own anchor point, we can set this to word. So if we look really closely, and I know it's hard to see, but you see these little dots under each letter here? If I zoom out, you can still kind of see them. All these dots under each one, that represents its anchor point. If we change this to word, now you see it's just centered them to the bottom of each of these, right? If we do it to all, or line, right, there's one in the middle of each line. Let me go to the end so you can see layer. And if we go to all, it just gives us one single node right in the middle, right? And we can adjust these. So we have our scale, it's scaling out. Right now it's set to all, so they're all going to scale to the same point, right? That single anchor point down there. Let's say we just want it to be each word, right? So now they're at the bottom of each word. So if we see what that does, now they're going down together, bottom of each word, right? but maybe we don't want our anchor point there. Maybe we want it right dead center. That's where this grouping alignment comes in, right? So we can shift this around. You see those little X's moving. I can kind of put it right in the middle there. So when this goes in, it's scaling right down the middle, right? Maybe that's what I want. Okay. So I'll go back down to advanced. I'm going to add some ease on here. I'll do 60 again. I kind of use the same values because it kind of maintains a style if you have a style of animating and movement and stuff. So let's watch through. I'm going to slide this over so it stays up a little bit longer, so we have a little more gap where nothing happens right here. And I'll preview this out. RAM preview by hitting 0 on the numpad, or if you're on a laptop, I think it's Control 0 on your normal numbers. Oops, let me zoom out here so you can actually see the whole thing. It's got to RAM preview this again. So it's not real time. Here's real time. Okay, good, good, good. Okay, so there you go. There it is. If you want it to be faster, you can obviously give that a little bit less time and it'll go through that animation a little bit quicker. Okay, right? If you wanted it to go the opposite way, if you wanted this to come out first, remember, we'll go down to advanced. We'll change our mode to subtract, right? And we'll have to flip this offset since now we're reversing the way we're going through here. So we're going to have to set the end to 100 and the beginning to 0. 0. Okay, so now it's scaling out that way. Okay, so there's a lot of versatility here. I mean, I would play around with what it gives you. So I would use the transform properties. So position, scale, skew is kind of funky, but rotation's nice, opacity's nice. Or you can do all, then you can just, it gives you an entire transform panel that you can play with stuff. Fill color, stroke color. I mean, you can do something where if you wanted everything to change colors and wipe through it like we're doing, then you can do that. Stroke, width. There's a lot of options here. I typically don't play with these as much. But these tracking, line spacing, line anchor, character offset, character value, these are the goodies inside of here that we were animating. That's what these guys are. So these things that like space out the vertical spacing, the horizontal spacing. So yeah. So keep in mind, you know, if I get rid of that second animator, how it comes out, I can still animate using this transform. So if that's my animate in, and I just want it to fly down when it's done, I can still create this position keyframe, slide it down, and it still goes down, right? You can still do that, but you have a little bit more versatility up here, you know, which is nice. So, and I don't think you can position move the entire text layer. I think you have to go by line is the biggest you can do. So, so yeah, just remember we're never animating what we decided to, when we click the animate here, whether it's position, scale, we're never animating that value here unless we want to for some strange reason. So you can, but that's not what we're doing here. So I just want to stress that because a lot of you guys on Wednesday kept animating your position here. So, okay, so let's get out of here. Let's talk about effects. My background's super boring, right? So let's give it some life. If I go to effects and presets and I search gradient, it'll give us a few options for gradient animations. These effects and presets are nice. I'm going to delete this and just show you really quick. It gives you a rundown, so you can drop down and find all the effects and stuff that are in here. Animation presets have like obviously preset animations for you, so there's a whole section just for preset text animations here. So keep that in mind. It's kind of nice. I'm going to actually let's bring back my text layer, and I'm just going to get rid of all my animators. So we just have my normal text layer here, and that's what we. So let's select a gradient to make my background nice. I will search gradient, and I will select gradient. Mine just says, oh wow, or I'm sorry. if you search gradient on After Effects CC, which is what's in the office or what's in the lab, the effect is now called gradient ramp. But back in the old version, which is what I have, it's called just ramp. So if you just search ramp, that's essentially gradient. So you can either click and drag over to my background, or with my background selected, you can just double click. That'll add the effect up here to your effects controls, right? The effects controls is just a fast way to see what effects we have on a layer. You can play with them down here, but you have to arrow down, go to effects, go to ramp, and then you see everything, right? This is just a nice, faster view to see what effects we have on a layer. So it gave us a plain black to white ramp, which is kind of ugly. So the first thing I usually do is decide, do I want a linear gradient like this, or a radial one, where it's kind of a vignetting gradient. I'm going to do radial. And we still have our nodes at the top and bottom, which is kind of ugly. So start of ramp right here is all the way at the top. End of ramp is down here. You can either click and drag this little node, this is the starting point, to the middle, or if I undo that, you can click this little crosshair and just select right in the middle here. That'll move it there. If we zoom out and then use our space bar and hold it, we can come down here to see this node better. We can drag this out so it's a little bit better spaced out, right? And then we can set our colors, just a little more gradual gradient. So let's say since we have a blue thing here, let's say we want a lighter blue background. So we'll pick a light blue background here. And my habit, again, you can pick your own, but I always set one color, right? If this is the blue I want to go with, I always take my eyedropper right here and I select, if it's not going to work, okay, we'll do it this way. Oops, no, I'm in the wrong thing. I wonder why it's not working. It's not working right now. I always take my other color and I will pick right on top of that. So now I have two of the exact same blues, right? Then I'll take my end and I'll just make this a tad bit darker, just a little bit darker, right? So now we have a nice, I'm going to hide this, we have a nice little gradient blue rather than a flat blue, okay? I can't stress enough, by the way, if you want to see those nodes for start and end, you have to click on the actual ramp effect and then you can see these nodes right here, right? I can't stress enough, being subtle with color changes is the best. So you can see how these two colors aren't that different, and if we really wanted, we probably didn't even need to go that dark, but that looks much better than a flat blue. But if you go like really light to really dark, and it's like your gradient is like right up against it, like this looks horrible. That's not good. That's just bad design. So bring it out, make it subtle. You can still go a little bit dark with it. Like this looks fine in my opinion, but so ramp is a really important one. Alternatively, fill is pretty important too. If you have another solid, let's say we want to use this solid as a square or something like that. Like this is our square, right? We want squares to fly around or something. To set those colors, you could do ramp for gradient or fill. If you search fill, that'll just give you a nice fill effect, and you can pick a color that you want, right? So if we want a lighter, like a different color blue or whatever, I guess we can pick whip from these blues and make it dark. You can do that. I'm just, because this is annoying me, I'm going to have a fill layer on this text. I'm going to pick whip my background. But these pick whips are not, eyedropper tools are not working very well. And then I always use this eyedropper just because now I know that these colors are on the same color palette essentially. If I tried to set it myself, I wouldn't do it. But the fill effect's really nice if you want to give something color to easily change it. We talked a little bit about in class about some effects that you can generate from here, like a lens flare or snow or rain. They fill entire solids. So if we create a new solid, the way we would add snow is to create a solid and dump that effect on there. But to do it, it's always got to be black. So if you're going to dump effects onto a blank layer and have it like come over the top of your composition, got to set it to black. So I'll rename this. We'll do rain because we did snow in the homework. Set it to rain. We'll search rain over here. I think there's like CC rain or something like that. CC rainfall. Double click it with our layer selected. It comes up over here. So if we look in here, it's kind of hard to tell. Let's extend this out. It's kind of hard to tell. Let me see if we can. We might have to adjust some settings so you can see it a little bit better. You can barely tell. You can kind of see it. I don't know if it'll come up well when you guys see it, but you see these little drips of rain. I'm going to make my size bigger so you can really tell, right? So here's my rain. So it's just on a black background. Well, it's not coming through. If I hide this, it's not coming through on top of this. And that's because our blending layer, our blending mode is set to just normal, right? This switch down here switches our blending modes of our layers. And we'll get more into this layer later, but for some of these effects, it's important to know where this blending mode is. So if we click this, our blending mode, mine's here. I think before you guys might have been over here. I wonder if I can move. Yeah, there we go. Now it matches. So our blending mode's here. If we click this, it gives you all the blending modes that you have in Photoshop. There's a ton of them, and this just shows the way that this layer blends with the layers below it. So normal means this is completely opaque. You won't be able to see any layers underneath it since it's just a black solid that takes up my entire comp. If I set this to add, it'll only add the items that I generated on top of it. So it'll hide all that black behind it. So now if I bring my size of my rain down to something more manageable, there's some thick drops earlier. So now if I preview this, right, so now we've got a rain scene. Pretty cool. So if you had like a shot even and you want to composite some rain on top of some footage that you shot and make it a rainy night, you could totally do that. And you can give it wind. If we add some wind, now it'll like be like sheeting over to the side, right? It gives it like an angle. Right? You can play with all these effects, and these are all these keyframes next to them means that we can customize, we can animate them all, right? So if we want our drops to start at 0, I can create a keyframe here. And if you'll notice, nothing came up down here. I can't see my keyframes. When you start a keyframe up here and hit U, then it'll bring it up down here. You can see everything you've put keyframes into. So if I start at 0 with my drops, and I want over 2 seconds, I want it to get really heavy rain, right? I want like 15,000 raindrops. Okay, that's like torrential downpour. Right, so we're going to start from 0 and go to 15,000. And we're going to sit at 15,000 for a few seconds, maybe to like just before 4 seconds, 11 frames. And then we want it to die down. We'll go back to 0. So this is my animate on, animate off, right? I'll play this through so you can see it. Okay, so it slowly comes on, heavy, heavy, heavy rain, and then now it starts to dissipate, and it's gone. So these are all nice and customizable. These effects that have CC before them, those are really powerful built-in ones that are very cool. If I clear this out, if you just go over to your effects and presets and search CC, it brings up all of them. These are all really cool. So even like ball action is really neat. If we put it on a text layer, you can make your text into balls and like fly them in and stuff. It's pretty sweet. So play around with a lot of these. This gives you like a weird little 8-bit thing. Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's a cool little effect. So these CC plugins are really powerful and they're really fun to play with. So I really encourage you guys to get used to these. I could go through a lot of these that are important, but honestly there's just not enough time, and a lot of them you use for very specific reasons. I don't know what CC Starburst is, but I kind of want to know what that is now. If I change this back to dissolve, what is that? Oh lordy. It's like you're flying through stars. There you go. It's like you're in space, kind of. A really weird version of space. Okay, so that is some of the basic effects that we'll use for the homework, and you'll use a lot of these down the road as well, especially when we get into footage and stuff like that. Another one that I'll use a lot is drop shadow. So if you just search drop shadow, you can throw that on any layer. So if I throw it on my text here, I can create like a soft you know, too far. If I do like a, you know, you can do that if you want to. It's probably pretty harsh. So that's nice for drop shadows. I think I have that maybe on some of my text. You can do ramps for text as well. So if I throw this on top, I'm going to get rid of my drop shadow. I'm going to get rid of my fill. If we do a ramp and we set our colors, I'm going to do the exact same way. So if I want my blue, I'll start with this blue in my background. Let's say I want this to be my color. I'm going to set them both to the same. Man, it's only works. I have to like spam it a million times for it to come up. Okay, this way. I'm going to eyedrop on top, so I've got two of the exact same colors, right? Which they don't look the same to me for some reason, but and then I'm just going to take, let's see, I'm going to move, if I click my ramp, I can see my nodes. I'm going to move my nodes so it's a little bit easier to tell what's going to happen here. If I make this top one a little bit lighter, right, now I have a little bit of this, and I can set this to where I want it to be, but now I have a gradually fading, nice ramp, right? It looks pretty good, pretty solid from a design standpoint. If I want to drop a shadow on it now, you can search drop shadow. Okay, good. And I'll set this to, I'm just going to be like a really harsh, really close. Yeah, cool. So I did set my distance to 2, which is pretty close to it, and my softness to 3, so it's pretty harsh. And then my opacity is 100%. So here's a decent looking text layer, I think, in my opinion. Obviously, it's a certain style, so it doesn't work for everything. But so notice, though, that the order of these effects on my layer matters. Right now, I'm generating a ramp across my text, and then I'm adding a drop shadow after it. If I switch these, I'm going to generate my ramp first. If I zoom in, you can see what's happening. I'm generating my drop shadow first, and then I'm putting a ramp over that, all of it, right? So look and see how this switches. I'm going to switch it back. So now it has my drop shadow, but if I flip them, it's adding a ramp to that drop shadow as well, which, you know, I guess you might want to do, but I really want the drop shadow after my ramp, so now it's there, right? So that's another important piece to keep in mind. If something's not looking how you expect it to look, it might be because these aren't in order. So it's just kind of got to go through your progression of what's happening with this layer. So those are the big points. I would play around with some of the different effects, play around with some of the text animation. If you guys have questions, email me, just mattturner15@gmail.com. Call me at, I don't want to give my phone number because it's going to be online, but you can call me as well. It's in the syllabus. I really encourage you to reach out if you're having problems, because everything's going to get harder from this point on. And I will kind of hold your guys' hands through these first few weeks and help you as much as I can, and kind of let you limp along if you're not starting to grasp it right away, which is perfectly fine. But this is going to pick up and get a lot harder and a lot more advanced, and we're going to start stacking things on top of each other. So if you get behind, it's really going to bite you in the butt. So I really encourage you guys to reach out, get help, watch these videos, go online, and if you're having trouble with text animation, go YouTube text animation After Effects. You know, the resources are there. There's no reason, you know, if I do my job right, there's no reason you guys should fall behind. So reach out, watch these things, and hopefully we can all start making some really cool stuff together in the coming weeks. So all right, thanks guys, appreciate you watching this. We'll see you on Wednesday.